but we want to begin with Kate Kogirin. She's live at the scene where this shooting happened. Kate, what's the latest there?
Well, Rob and Cheryl, the intersection of 52nd and Spalding, still several police officers here on the scene. We have seen investigators also working, coming in and out of multiple areas around here, undoubtedly with heavy hearts, knowing that one of their own was shot. The shooting happened along what appears to be a residential street near Sawyer Elementary in Gage Park.
Once again, officer down, 5258 South Spalding. We getting the EMS rolling.
Chicago fire officials say at least one officer was shot. Sources tell us the officer was shot in the leg and face and was taken to Mount Sinai Hospital in critical condition. As for what led up to this shooting, we are still waiting for official details from Chicago police. Now, those details include if anyone else or anyone has been arrested or if anyone else was injured in this shooting. Reporting live in Gage Park, Kate Kogirin, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Back to you.
All right, Kate, thank you for that update tonight. And there is a large police presence at Mount Sinai Hospital.
That's where Liz Nagy is live tonight with the latest for us there. Liz.
Rob and Cheryl, we don't have much more information here to offer than what Kate was just able to tell you in that report, that a Chicago police officer was critically injured in a shooting about 4.5 miles from here late this afternoon. But you can see there is just an absolutely massive response from the Chicago Police Department. We've now been pushed back several blocks. When our crews first arrived here on the scene at Mount Sinai Hospital, we were able to get very close to that emergency room. That's about several blocks from where we're now standing. That is because there are so many officers who've now run here to the hospital to be in the presence of other Chicago police officers, to perhaps get any information about that officer who we're told is being treated here for critical injuries. This is what happens when officers are shot and critically injured in these situations. Officers that are nearby come to the hospital as quickly as they can. They're here sort of as a support mechanism. We're also awaiting information here from Chicago's police superintendent, from any sort of top brass within the department, about what they can tell us about that incident and the condition of the officer who's now being treated. But for now, all we can really tell you is that a Chicago police officer was critically injured in that situation at 52nd and Spalding late this afternoon, and we're hoping to hear more from top officials at the Chicago Police Department outside the hospital here within the next few minutes. And of course, when those details come, we'll bring you everything we can. We did just speak with the president of the Fraternal Order of Police, the union that represents Chicago police officers. He is here trying to check on the condition of that officer, trying to be with other Chicago police officers at this time. So it's a very fluid situation, and also there's a real feeling of chaos and instability here as officers try and figure out what has happened to one of their own. Rob and Cheryl?
And Liz, we can see a massive outpouring of police cars lined up near the hospital. Have you been able to find out any information if Superintendent David Brown is on his way, is nearby, already arrived, as well as Mayor Lightfoot?
We've all been reaching out to our sources within the Chicago Police Department, within City Hall, and of course the mayor's office. And we are aware that many people within City Hall and the police department are all trying to get this information. We haven't been given any specifics. We assume that Mayor Lightfoot may come here later this evening, but we've not been told by her office. We're told that she is aware of this situation. Superintendent Brown, we've not been given any information on his whereabouts. But of course, all of these detectives, investigators, and rank and file officers of the Chicago Police Department are speaking with their colleagues, trying to figure out what is going on. And if Mayor Lightfoot is to show up here at the hospital, we hope to hear from her as well as Superintendent Brown.
Liz, stay with us for a minute here. Chopper 7 HD above you is showing just a huge amount of Chicago police officers, but also in the video that we saw earlier as you were talking, Illinois State troopers are there. Typically what happens when a 10-1 call comes in, that's a radio call from an officer saying an officer down or they need help. They rush to the scene. And now we're seeing, as you mentioned, they've rushed to the hospital. But that's an extraordinary amount of police officers tonight. Have you had a chance, I know they pushed you back a few blocks, have you had a chance to talk to any of those officers or hear any of their conversations as we wait for more information?
Rob, unfortunately, we have not been able to speak with any of those officers individually. I have reached out to some officers that I know personally. Some of my colleagues have done the same. They are, like I said, working to get that very same information that we are, because they're very concerned about the well-being of their own officer, who we're told is being treated here for critical injuries. But here at the hospital, we've not been able to get close to any of those officers. The closest I was able to come to that was speaking with the president of the Fraternal Order of Police as he came out of the hospital and went to his car parked just down the street here. And at the time I asked, is there anything that you can tell us? And there was no more information that he could offer at the time. But there was a real sense of urgency of him running out of the hospital, trying to get to his car and perhaps get back inside. We cover a lot of these situations, unfortunately, and this certainly has a feeling of urgency, of chaos. And when you start seeing people show up from other police departments that are not the Chicago Police Department, not the department of the injured officer, that's when things really start to get concerning. So we're watching this scene sort of grow and develop. More and more officers show up here, and we're hoping that we'll hear from somebody in the News Affairs Division, the people who are responsible for giving the media information, perhaps the police superintendent himself, as to what exactly is going on and what led up to this situation. But right now, they're doing the very critical work of both trying to figure out what happened at that scene and also trying to make sure that this officer is well taken care of.
Very good. Liz, thank you for that very compelling and comprehensive update for us tonight.
Liz will stay out there. Kate also will stay on this story as we get more information. The other big story involving the Chicago Police Department was a big announcement today. We're following this news that Chicago Police Superintendent David Brown is resigning. He took this job in the beginning months of the pandemic. And
he took a lot of heat for the spike in crime seen in the city since he was hired. Eric Hong reporting tonight from police headquarters.
Superintendent Brown says he's leaving CPD on March 16th to take a job as chief operating officer of a personal injury law firm in Texas. The announcement comes about 6 months before he turns 63, which is the mandatory CPD retirement age.
His nearly 3-year tenure, at times tumultuous, Superintendent David Brown has been the face of CPD during a time of historic change. Hired in April 2020 during the early weeks of the pandemic, Brown had a national reputation after a long career with the Dallas Police Department. But he came under fire in the summer of 2020 following not one but 2 rounds of unrest and looting. That criticism growing louder amid a spike in violent crime. In fact, multiple categories of crime are up from before he took his post.
Whomever the next superintendent will be, I would love for our city to get behind him for the betterment of the city, to make sure that we have census violence and crime reduced to a very low level.
Today, Mayor Lightfoot praising Brown, citing 2022 reductions in crime, record gun seizures, progress on the consent decree, and promotions of more women to senior ranks. Brown, in a statement, said it has been an honor and a privilege to work alongside the brave men and women of the Chicago Police Department. I will continue to pray that all officers return home to their families safe at the end of their shift. Mayor Lightfoot says First Deputy Eric Carter will be interim superintendent after Brown. A relatively new civilian body, the Community Commission for Public Safety and Accountability, will come up with a short list of possible superintendents, and the new mayor must choose from those candidates.
Today, Brandon Johnson said he would look to fill that position from within the ranks of CPD. Paul Vallis said he would choose a superintendent who prioritizes community policing. At police headquarters, Eric Hong, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Eric, thanks so much for that tonight. Brown's announcement comes just one day after Chicago picked the top 2 candidates in the race for mayor. Paul Vallis will square off with Brandon Johnson in the April 4th runoff.
Now the search is on for the new head of the Chicago Police Department. This will become a hot topic on the campaign trail. Political reporter Craig Wall takes a look at what's ahead.
Paul Vallis and Brandon Johnson both made it clear during the campaign that they would replace Superintendent David Brown. Today, the candidates are releasing statements, both saying they will appoint a new superintendent from among the ranks of CPD. Public safety, as it was in the primary, shaping up to be a top issue in the runoff.
Thank you.
Paul Vallis out thanking voters and looking for new ones a day after he secured a spot in the runoff. Brandon Johnson laying low after securing his spot in the April 4th election. Both candidates looking to expand on their base of voters.
Well, look, I think if you look at, this race and what we've offered, every geographical area in the city of Chicago has responded to our message. We built a broad-based coalition, Black, brown, white, Asian. It's a multicultural, multi-generational movement.
I'm going to be out and about in the community, and I'm going to be answering questions, and I'm going to continue to articulate what I see as clear pathways towards ensuring that no community is left behind and that all communities are safe and secure.
This race pitting two polar opposite candidates, Johnson, the far-left progressive, versus Vallis, the moderate to conservative Democrat. The race could be determined by several key issues.
I think it's race, I think it's education, I think it's crime, I think it's business. I think those are the four pillars that they will both have to address.
Johnson counting on union backing, Vallis banking on support from the business community.
The city of Chicago certainly reacted and responded to our message of building a better, stronger, safer Chicago. And, I'm looking forward to retiring this tale of two cities.
I have every confidence that I'm going to do well and that I'm going to win in a resounding fashion because people want a problem solver, and that's what I am.
Brandon Johnson says he'll be out on the campaign trail starting tomorrow. This race shaping up to be a real battle. Both candidates looking to secure endorsements from their former rivals. Back to you.
Craig, thank you. We have complete election results, including all the wards, at abc7chicago.com or on our news app. If you're watching us there, you can get caught up on all the race results from last night.
We also want to update breaking news out of Mount Prospect tonight, where a 12-year-old was hit by a school bus. It happened at Loudon Lane and Wolf Road shortly after 4 o'clock this evening. The child has leg injuries but is expected to survive. The bus driver was cited for failure to exercise due care.
We want to check our weather forecast on this Wednesday. It was a really nice day. Temperatures in the 50s. But meteorologist Cheryl Scott is now watching something on Friday. There's already an AccuWeather alert slated.
Yes, big changes on the way. Today, absolutely beautiful. Another calm day tomorrow. Won't be nearly as warm, but the system that we are monitoring still way back to the south and west. It will continue to develop here and push through the middle of the country, and it's going to pull in a lot of moisture. So very heavy rain is going to be moving south to north here into parts of the upper Midwest and the Great Lakes. This is going to arrive Friday late morning, continue through the afternoon and evening. We're going to see a mix of some heavy rain as well as some heavy snow. Models in a little bit of a disagreement where the heavy snow band is going to set up, but you can see, for instance, the Euro model here. It's been a little bit more aggressive, keeping that snow band on top of Chicago areas north of I-80 as we go through our Friday afternoon and evening, which would mean more accumulating snow for the city, areas up to the north and back to the west, and some more rain off to the south. But we are looking at a discrepancy in the models, and some of that snow total could be pushed a little bit farther to the south. So we're going to break it down into more detail, show you the outcomes and the scenarios that we are expecting as we head into our Friday, and really hoping there's more agreement in the next 12 to 24 hours for sure. Back to you for now.
Okay, Cheryl, thank you. We'll see you again in a few minutes. We're learning more about a deadly Chicago police shooting from last month.
Well, the Civilian Office of Police Accountability releasing body cam videos showing the shooting in the city's Irvin Park neighborhood. Well, Chicago police shot and killed the man on February 8th after a bouncer at a nearby bar on the northwest side said the man pointed a gun at him. At the time, police said there was an exchange of gunfire, but the next day, COPA said it's unclear whether the man fired at the officers. Now, body-worn cameras showing that the officers' views of what happened that night.
Our Liz Nagy reports.
As a Chicago police officer gets out of the driver's seat, he immediately starts sprinting down the street. And as he clicks the audio on his body-worn camera, the angle from his partner's silent body camera is much the same. In that shot, you see the man both officers are chasing before the subject rounds a corner. Within a matter of seconds and multiple profane warnings, "Get on the ground! Stop it!" Both officers fire repeatedly. We've frozen the video right before the deadly gunfire.
Roll ambulance! Roll ambulance!
Several minutes pass as officers wait for medical help to arrive.
Still got the gun in his hand.
One officer eventually is seen kicking that gun from the man's hand.
We're not looking. Somebody guard that weapon.
Liz Nagy, ABC7 Eyewitness News.
And now investigators with the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, COPA, will try to determine if the man who died, identified by the medical examiner as Isidro Valverde, fired that gun at police officers at any point in that incident.
At a rally tonight in suburban Oak Lawn calling for more charges in the violent arrest of a teenager. Organizers want 2 more officers to be charged. This morning, Officer Patrick O'Donnell was charged with aggravated battery and official misconduct for his involvement last July in the arrest of 17-year-old Hadi Abutela. Video showing Abutela being hit repeatedly during a traffic stop. Police said they smelled marijuana and the teenager tried to run away. Officers say they did recover a gun from the teenager. Organizers of today's rally say they want justice.
The 3 officers who actually put their hands on Hadi, we want those officers to be convicted, of course.
Abutela is facing charges in juvenile court for the gun.
A former standout athlete from Chicago's Morgan Park High School has been shot and killed. Jatani Sterling was found dead near the campus of the college he attended in Atlanta, Georgia. Leah Hope has the latest on the investigation and how he's being remembered.
Practice is canceled today.
I gotta bury another ball player. We're not supposed to do that.
News that former championship baseball player Jatani Sterling from Morgan Park High School was shot and killed while away at college is hitting hard.
All my players from all over broke down, crying, everywhere. All over the country, players calling me. How did this happen to Sterling?
It's hard, especially seeing how my coach is taking all of this. I can tell he's very disappointed and hurt.
It's tragic because it wasn't supposed to happen. He was a ball player.
Sterling was a sophomore on a baseball scholarship at Clark Atlanta University. Yesterday, he was shot in a parking lot very close to campus. Atlanta police are investigating. Some students who played with Sterling on the 2021 championship team are still at Morgan Park. Like too many Chicago teens, Sterling is not the only one close to them who they've lost to gun violence.
It's just crazy how life works and, how things could happen unexpectedly. And it's scary because, that thing can happen to all of us.
Still unreal to me. I can't really wrap my head around it. It's just so unfortunate. I never really thought something like that would happen. I always looked at him as a leader because, he was older than me. I looked up to him. He always was full of energy, always was putting his best effort in whatever he did.
His baseball coaches, who had known Sterling since he was a young kid, work at Morgan Park and with other youth sports programs to help young people pursue their dreams. And they thought Sterling was well on his way.
He was a student, and he was an athlete, and he was a leader in his team. It's heartbreaking. It really is heartbreaking. I don't think there's another word I can really use to describe it.
The Morgan Park Mustang season opener is March 14th. The players say this year they will play for Sterling. In the Morgan Park neighborhood, Leah Hope, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
It's a tragedy. Another young life gone too soon. Let's go back live. We are staying on top of this breaking news we've been covering all afternoon here on ABC 7 after a Chicago police officer was shot on the city's southwest side. You can see a massive show of support. Police cars lined up outside Mount Sinai Hospital, and that's where the officer was taken, and fellow officers, of course, gathering, praying, and waiting on word of their fellow officer.
Our Liz Nagy and a news crew there on the ground, R.K. Kogarin at the scene of this shooting, so we've got you covered as we learn more information, and we'll continue to update you while we're on the air here until 8 o'clock. We'll be right back.
We are starting March off. The weather is really nice. It feels like spring outside, a little spring fling, because we hear just in a matter of 48 hours, things will look very different here in the city.
Yeah.
It could be blanketed in snow. Meteorologist Cheryl Scott is here to talk about the timing and the AccuWeather forecast. Hey, Cheryl.
Let me get this straight, too. If you are wanting snow, this isn't going to be a beautiful type of snow. It's going to be that heavy, wet, slushy, messy snow that's moving in, and also rain for parts of the area. It's just going to get downright messy as we go into the day on Friday. Right now, though, we are quiet. We have some active weather off to the south of us. That's where you can see a tornado watch. And then this action, this area of low pressure back to the south and west, moving out of the Las Vegas area, the Four Corners region, that will continue to evolve, push over to the east just a bit, really pick up some moisture from the deep south. And then this low is going to travel right into our region. We're going to be on the north side of this, so we have to contend with some colder air to the north. That's going to allow for some of us to see some snow. Now, there are some discrepancies in the model outputs here in terms of where this heavy snow band is going to be setting up, and we are keeping a very close eye on this because right across our region, we're looking at that rain snow line. So we're looking at periods of heavy rain potentially here across northwest Indiana, and this one model, the Ural model, this has been more aggressive in keeping that snow and the heavy band of snow across Chicago along and north of I-80. That will mean more accumulating snow here across northern Illinois, and then the heavy wet snow with some rain mixing in for parts of northwest Indiana, which would keep the rain totals down. But as we flip over just a few miles, this area of low pressure on another model is just a little bit farther to the south by about 30 to 50 miles at this point in time. But it really is a game changer in terms of that heavy snow band, because that's how fine and basically fine in terms of the area this snow band covers. So you can see from Chicago over to northwest Indiana, that shifts a little bit farther to the south. So that will push heavier snow totals into northwest Indiana and south of the city. So we are continuing to monitor this as we go into the next 24 hours and hope things come into better agreement. But if we take a look at the higher totals with that Euro situation panning out, scenario number one, that will press some higher snow accumulations here across northern Illinois. Now notice these numbers, they might seem quite high. What we want to show you is the possibility here of seeing over 3+ inches of snow. These snow totals will likely be impacted by the nature of the snow being heavy and wet, which means smaller amounts, and also some rain mixing in at times, which could potentially keep those totals down. But there you can see the other model keeping that band of heavier snow and the higher accumulations just a few miles off to the south and east. So this is something we're really fine-tuning here as we go into the next 24 hours, because like I said, the difference between these two systems, the two models, about 50 to 80 miles. So uncertainty is high at this point in time on exactly where the heaviest snow band will set up. What you need to plan for is Friday afternoon and evening being basically dangerous and treacherous out there on area roads. That's why we do have the AccuWeather alert. Temperatures will be in the 30s. It's also going to be quite windy, and we're going to see reduced visibility with that wet weather and the snow moving in Friday afternoon and into the evening. So plan accordingly for that. By the weekend, we do dry out. Right now, we sit at 51 degrees, a nice start to March. Temperatures well above average. Tonight, we cool off a bit. We drop off into the 30s as we head into the day tomorrow. Highs near 40 degrees. So that's near average. Friday temps go down. Rain, snow threat across the area. Messy travel conditions. We dry out into the weekend. Sunday looking a little bit brighter with sunshine there and a high of 47. So the second half of the weekend looking a little bit better, and then wet weather moving back in for early next week. Back to you guys.
All right, Cheryl, thanks so much for that. We want to update you now on the breaking news we've been following all afternoon and especially at this hour, where a Chicago police officer has been shot on the city's southwest side.
So this happened near the corner of 52nd and Spalding. Kate O'Gearan joins us live near the scene. Kate got out there a bit ago and might have some new information here. We want to check in with you and find out what's going on right now.
Oh, Rob and Cheryl, there is still a significant police presence here at the scene. Investigators still walking and wandering around this area as we wait for what we have been told is an upcoming update from Chicago police. Chicago fire officials have told us a shooting happened at 52nd and Spalding in Chicago's Gage Park neighborhood just outside Sawyer Elementary School. Why police were called to the scene, we do not have those details confirmed just yet. We did speak with one neighbor who lives along the block where that shooting happened, and he said he came home to find a large police presence surrounding his block.
I mean, I love this neighborhood. It's not something you hear, you see everything every day, but it happens, unfortunately.
Again, we are still waiting to hear from Chicago police. We're all waiting to confirm if anyone else was injured in this incident or if anyone has been arrested. We will be sure to bring you those updates as we have them. Reporting live in Gage Park, Kate Kogiran, ABC 7 Eyewitness News, back to you in the studio.
So, Kate, I know you've been working your sources all afternoon. Have you been able to find out what brought the police officers to that area in the first place?
Well, Cheryl, right now we have been reaching out to our police sources, officials. At this point, again, we have been told that we know there's going to be an update coming up, I believe, in the next 15 minutes at Mount Sinai, where that officer, we were told, was taken to following that shooting. At this point, again, just very limited details. We know exactly where that shooting happened, but we don't know exactly what led up to it. We're hoping that those details will be unveiled again in the next 15 minutes.
Thanks, Kate. As you mentioned, that officer was taken to Mount Sinai Hospital.
And that's where Liz Nagy is live for us tonight. Liz, do you have an update or any new information on the shooting?
Cheryl, the only new information that we'll be able to tell you is that we're expecting to hear some information officially from the police department here outside the hospital about 7:45 p.m. We do have some officers who just walked across the street here to address the media and told us that all of that information, the questions that we have been asking all afternoon, some of those questions will be answered out here at 7:45 this evening. Now, we've asked who we're going to be hearing from, and they can't even give us that information definitively, but we've been told we will likely be hearing from Superintendent David Brown as to whether or not he'll be joined by the mayor or other top officials with the police department. That's still unclear. But those members of the police department that we have been able to speak with are still not giving any information officially. All we know right now officially is that one Chicago police officer was critically injured and is being treated here at Mount Sinai Hospital. But there is a massive police presence here outside the hospital. It stretches for at least 2 city blocks. When we first arrived here late this afternoon, we were able to get close to that emergency room. And since then, the media crews have been asked to move farther and farther away so officers could arrive and join fellow officers here at the hospital. We've also seen some members of other police departments that are not Chicago Police Department, like Illinois State Troopers, arriving here at the hospital. When things like this happen, when officers, in fact, are critically injured during these situations, police officers often run either to the scene of where this happened or to the hospital where that officer is being treated to get close to the information, but also just to be in the presence of their other officers. You certainly get a sense here outside Mount Sinai Hospital that this is a critical situation. But the information, how badly that officer is injured right now, we just don't know. And we are hoping to get some details on why those officers were called to the scene and any details about that officer's injury and conditions when we hear from the police superintendent in about 20 minutes or so.
Okay, so that's a bit of new information. Liz reporting that we'll likely hear from Police Superintendent David Brown on the day he has announced that he's stepping away from the department. When he arrives at a scene like this, you know certainly the officer has been seriously injured. So Liz will stay there on the scene for us, and if that happens while we're on the air here, we'll bring it to you as well. We're standing by as we're now learning that we're going to get an update, an official update at some point here in the next half hour.
Yeah, earlier we had reports that the officer was shot in the face and injuries to the leg, so we're not sure if that changed at all or that has been updated with information. But as Liz said, about 15 minutes from now, we may learn some more information, more details about what actually happened. We should let
our viewers know real quick that there is a lot of information out there that you might be seeing, but we take great care here in our newsroom to take it slow, source our information. We want to make sure we get this right. So that's why we're continuing to ask for updates. We're going to report what we know, and as soon as we find out more, we share it with you. But we're very careful in these situations to share what we know and what just might be out there on social media or elsewhere.
Right, absolutely. For now, we're going to take a short break, and we will join you back on the other side. A financial lifeline for families across the Chicago area is now cut short.
Federal government ending emergency SNAP benefits that began at the start of the pandemic. I-Team consumer investigator Samantha Chapman shows us what local organizations are doing to help fill the void.
The average person receiving SNAP benefits will see a reduction of about $95 a month, and large families will see cuts closer to $250 a month. Local food banks have been gearing up for this day as people across our area scramble to put food on the table. Dozens of people wait outside this food pantry in the back of the Yards neighborhood after waking up to a portion of their SNAP benefits slashed.
It made me sick to my stomach.
Pamela Androvic says she's been getting an additional $95 a month in food benefits since the spring of 2020. Now, those extra funds are gone.
It's devastating, and I don't know what I'm going to do. These are people who need SNAP benefits. We're in dire strait. We need help from the government. We don't eat without these SNAP benefits.
She's among millions of people across the country who are now trying to figure out how they can stretch the benefits they do have. But with grocery prices at record highs, many people are panicking.
It will really severely impact many households.
Man Yi Lee with the Greater Chicago Food Depository says the people they serve are extremely concerned.
This is going to increase the rate of food insecurity in the city of Chicago and in Cook County. Currently, 1 in 5 households in the Chicago metro area are facing food insecurity.
Organizations like the Greater Chicago Food Depository say their food bank partners are gearing up for big crowds, making sure they have an abundance of grocery items on their shelves to meet the increased need. It's assistance many of these folks tell me they wish they didn't need, but currently can't live without.
If I could work, I wouldn't even ask the government for a dime, but unfortunately I've been disabled for a while and I depend on this.
It's clear many people in our area need those additional SNAP benefits, especially with grocery prices that are through the roof. Senator Dick Durbin and Congressman Jonathan Jackson are both on agriculture committees. They both tell me that they are committed to working with their colleagues in Congress to ensure families have the resources that they need to put food on the table. Samantha Chapman, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
All right, Samantha, thank you for that. Now, we are staying on top of the breaking news we've been covering all afternoon after a Chicago police officer was shot on the city's southwest side. That was happening on 52nd Street. And we have been following the story all afternoon. As you can see, there is a massive police presence at Mount Sinai Hospital. After the officer was shot, the officer was taken to Mount Sinai Hospital to be treated. We were told earlier by our reporters at the scene that the officer had been shot in the face and in the legs and was rushed to the hospital immediately. We still don't have an update on the officer's condition or if Superintendent David Brown or Mayor Lightfoot have arrived at the scene, but what we can tell you is what we can see from Chopper 7 HD is this massive police presence here at the hospital surrounded. And as Liz Nagy said, it goes stretching 2 to 3 blocks. And those cars have been pulling up as the hours are passing along with Illinois State Police have been arriving at the scene. Reporters were asked to back off from the scene, maybe 2 or 3 blocks away. So they are getting their information as it becomes available. We've been told that there is supposed to be a news conference with an update at 7:45, but we don't know who will be attending that news conference. But we're staying on top of this story all evening for you.
We'll take a quick break and we'll be right back.
Well, tonight there are some major questions for 1,300 workers at a Jeep manufacturing company in Belvedere tonight after the assembly line's temporary shutdown. While they haven't lost their jobs yet, it is forcing them to make some very tough decisions.
Michelle Gallardo went out to Boone County, where a permanent closure of the plant could leave a devastating impact.
The mood was grim for most of those walking out of a UAW Local 1268 meeting held in Rockford today to discuss their members' future. Around 1,350, all of them laid off as of yesterday when Belvedere's Stellantis assembly plant went dark, the company idling the plant indefinitely.
I don't want to go through all the unemployment stuff and everything, so I'm just going to probably go and just retire and be, cleared up, be done with it.
The closure was announced in December, leaving longtime employees with a conundrum: relocate or lose their full-time benefits.
I came from Indianapolis Foundry 18 years ago, so I've already done this once. I'm not really wanting to do it again, but if I have to, I will.
For years, the city of Belvedere has been synonymous with auto manufacturing and Chrysler. Built in the 1960s, the plant at one point employed nearly 6,000 people, becoming one of the region's main economic drivers. Most recently, this was the home of the Jeep Cherokee. And it's not just about jobs. Even residents' water bills here are lower. That may soon change, however. Stellantis saying they have not yet decided whether the plant's idling will become permanent or not.
It's not a comfortable position to be in when you're waiting, and there isn't a whole lot more you can do.
In announcing the closure, Stellantis blamed increased cost related to the electrification of the auto industry. Belvedere's mayor today saying it is time for the federal government to step in with incentives to keep this plant from closing permanently.
If we lose this plant here, we lose the plant in the state, we lose the plant in the region, and we lose the plant potentially in this country.
In Belvedere, I'm Michelle Gallardo, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
All right, Michelle, thank you for that. Now we want to update you as we continue to do this throughout the hour. Breaking news we've been covering all afternoon. A Chicago police officer shot on the city's southwest side.
Chopper 7 HD will stay above the scene. Liz Nagy is down there reporting for us. She's had to move locations, and Cheryl, you were mentioning this earlier. Police have pushed the media back a few times. This is not uncommon. Sometimes they'll move us from locations depending on what's happening there. We are expected to hear something from officials. As you said earlier, too, we just don't know who will speak to us, but either from CPD, the City of Chicago, or both. We're going to keep an eye on this, and we're going to take a quick break, and we'll be back. Continue to follow breaking news. A Chicago police officer has been shot.
Well, that officer was taken to Mount Sinai Hospital, and that is where Liz Nagy is joining us live tonight with new information and an update. Liz.
Cheryl, we have learned that Mayor Lightfoot is on her way here to Mount Sinai Hospital, and we've been told by people within her office that she will be joining people for the news conference that we're expecting in just a few minutes. We've still not been able to clarify whether we will be hearing directly from Superintendent David Brown himself or perhaps other top officials within the police department, but we are expecting to hear from them within the next 5 minutes. I have been told by officials with the police department that Superintendent David Brown is here at the hospital, so whether he will be giving us the information himself or whether he will perhaps be speaking with officers inside the hospital, that's still not clear. What we do know is that one Chicago police officer was shot this afternoon in the Gage Park neighborhood and has suffered critical injuries. That officer was brought here to Mount Sinai Hospital, and since that happened, we have seen a growing, quite frankly, massive police presence here outside the hospital. The number of police cars stretches for blocks. There are officers with the Chicago Police Department, with the Illinois State Police Department that have joined other officers out here. People rushing here to get information, to find out exactly what happened to one of their officers, and just to be in the presence of other police officers to sort of feel that camaraderie and comfort at a time when they really need it. But we're hoping in the next few minutes to get some concrete answers on how that officer is doing and what exactly happened that led up to this shooting this afternoon. Robin, Cheryl?
We plan to bring that to our viewers live. Wanted to ask you, I know you had to move. Was that the police urging you to move, or you just wanted to relocate to a different location?
No, it was police officers that asked us to move. We were across the street. Initially, when we first got here this afternoon, we were directly across from the emergency room where most of the action was happening. And as more and more police officers showed up, they asked the media to move farther and farther back so they can accommodate those officers. They've now brought us just outside the main entrance of that hospital, so we're waiting to hear from officials. Hopefully they'll walk just out the front door of that hospital in the next few minutes and give us that information. But this is the designated area where they have asked us to be, and I've looked around a bit to see if we could see anybody coming or going or more people continuing to arrive. I have to say we have not seen more officers continue to show up here at the hospital probably in at least the last 20 minutes, if not half hour. So this presence is not getting any bigger now, but we don't know if perhaps those officers are all congregating inside the hospital or if perhaps they're sort of in a designated area where they've asked us to stay away from while they learn about what's going on with this officer and comfort each other in private right now.
So Liz, we know that a news conference is shortly coming. Have they given you any direction on where you should move, or would it be in the area where they've asked you to move to already?
No, we are with all the members of the media here outside the hospital, and we can see that the officers are walking out right now. That's the contingent of officers approaching our microphones right now. So we'll let you watch them walk up to the microphones, see who is out here. And we will be hearing information now.
Okay. Liz, thank you. We want to pause for just a moment, and we're going to allow our on-air audience to hear this news conference. Stay with us.
And good evening, everybody. We are breaking into programming tonight to bring you an update on the breaking news we've been following all afternoon. Chicago police are about to hold a news conference right now to give us an update on an officer who was shot this afternoon at 52nd and Spalding on the city's southwest side. Let's listen in.
As we wait for someone to approach the microphones, we want to get you updated at home if you're just joining us. This was a shooting at 52nd and Spalding. A Chicago police officer shot there and taken to Mount Sinai Hospital. So what you're seeing here is a huge group of officers at Mount Sinai Hospital. Our chopper is above the scene, and you can see there are dozens and dozens of Chicago police officer squad cars there. They rushed to that scene, and look at that. That's outside the main entrance there. That's outside the emergency room entrance, and you can see how many officers are there. Illinois State Police have also joined these officers as we await an official update from the city of Chicago and likely the Chicago Police Department.
And we have been told that Mayor Lightfoot is on the way. We've also been told that Superintendent David Brown, who announced his resignation today, is already at Mount Sinai Hospital. We are still unclear on what happened here at 52nd and Spalding and why police were originally called to the scene. We have no information on that, but we do know it happened this afternoon, and an officer was shot and rushed here to Mount Sinai Hospital, where you can see dozens of officers have gathered, and when you look at their faces, we have seen scenes like this before. It is very difficult to cover this. Liz Nagy at the hospital, Karen Jordan at the hospital, Kate Kogarin is live at the scene. The officers showing their support gathering tonight, and you can just see the faces of the officers supporting one of their own. And we've been told that the officer was shot in the face and the legs, but we do not know any more information, whether the officer, how long the officer has been on the police force. But what we do know is that a news conference is scheduled to get underway any minute now. And we know that the mayor is on her way, and Superintendent David Brown has arrived at the hospital, as well as so many of the officers. We have no idea how long the officer has been on the police force, but what we do know, we have seen police cars and police officers at least stretching 2 to 3 blocks around Mount Sinai. They have moved the reporters away from the emergency room entrance to the main entrance, where a scheduled news conference that you're looking at right there on your screen, it should be taking place just moments from now.
Superintendent David Brown and Mayor Lori Lightfoot approaching those microphones to get you up to speed on where this was. 52nd and Spalding, a call came in here of shots fired, and then a huge response of officers to there at 10-1 as well. This is the mayor's spokesperson right here.
The mayor will be with you shortly. This will be on topic only. I'll kick it off with you guys, and then it'll be the soup.
That's Cesar, one of the spokespeople for the mayor, and here's Superintendent David Brown. Let's listen.
We'll try to get through this. It's a very difficult time for the Chicago Police Department. We're heartbroken. Unfortunately, we're delivering the very tragic news that one of our own duty Chicago police officer has been fatally shot this evening. Officers were responding to a domestic related call of a person with a gun in the 5200 block of South Spalding in the 8th district at approximately 4:43 p.m. The call stated that an offender was chasing a female down the street with a gun. Two officer cars responded. One of the cars knocked on the door while the other car became engaged with the offender, who escaped and began running from officers armed with a gun. The officers began pursuing this offender. At close range, shots were exchanged between the offender and our officer, who is now deceased. The offender was struck, but he is still alive. He was struck in the head in a critical condition. Our officer, who is deceased, was shot multiple times. And as you know, here at Sinai Hospital, where he succumbed to his injuries. I ask that this city cover this officer's family. This is a family of public servants, and as you can imagine, they are taking this tragedy very, very hard. This young officer, who had right at 5 years on this department, had a bright future ahead of him. And this is something that no family should have to face. What we know about the offender is he's 18 years old, not much of a criminal history, one prior violation that we've been able to find so far this evening. The officer's partner, all the responding officers, the officers in the 8th district, every officer on this police department, and for that matter, every officer in this country, is grieving today. Policing is a big family of people who know at some point they may be asked to make the ultimate sacrifice. But you never wish or hope that it actually happens. And tonight this tragedy did. There are some broken hearts that will take a long time to grieve, to accept this. The investigation is ongoing. There is body-worn camera footage being reviewed of this incident. Our detectives are working to piece the evidence together, the ballistic evidence, other pod camera video, along with piecing together all the officers' body-worn camera video of this incident. But the information that we just shared with you is obviously preliminary, very early in the investigation, even though it's been several hours. But we're still continuing to aggressively address this. As you know, this will be turned over to COPA as well for a full and thorough investigation. We'll take a few questions, but the mayor would like to have comments as well, and then we'll come back for only on-topic questions. Thank you. Mayor?
Well, as you heard from the superintendent, tragedy has befallen the Chicago Police Department and really our city. Our hearts go out to this young officer's family. And I echo what the superintendent said. We need to lift them up in our prayers and wrap our arms around them as they go through this journey of grief and loss. I want to remind people that every single day, on every shift, officers run to danger for our safety. If you see an officer tonight or the next day or the day after that, thank them for their service. They need our thanks. They need our support, and they need to know that everyone in our city has their backs. I also want to say to the officers who are grieving tonight, please avail yourself of the EAP services and peer support that are there. We want to make sure that anyone who needs some extra support in this difficult time takes advantage of the resources that are there. But this is a terrible tragedy for our city, and we are mourning along with the officer's family.
Thank you, Mayor. We're going to kick it off with Natalie at BC. One question for a reporter.
You just heard from Mayor Lori Lightfoot and the Chicago Police Superintendent talk about one of their own. It is the end of watch for an officer who's been on the police force for 5 years. Superintendent Brown talked about this officer was answering a domestic violence call.
We're going to break away here to regular programming, but if you want to continue to follow us on our streaming newscasts, we're going to do so wherever you stream us or on abc7chicago.com.
Other places in the world that we're trying to facilitate getting here as soon as possible. We're really deferring to the family with limiting the information that goes out. As you know, we haven't given the name. And we would just ask all of you, please respect this family.
We are listening to Superintendent David Brown take a few questions about an officer who lost his life tonight. Let's listen in.
On the news that their loved one has passed. So that's why we take the time we do, and we don't want you standing out here waiting for us to talk about this. We're listening and paying attention to what the family wants first. So we'll have more about this officer later, but we're going to go at the family's pace. And their comfort level with sharing more about this officer.
Liz, ABC.
Superintendent, can you clarify again what led up to this incident, and was the officer shot or was he part of the first pair of responding?
Yeah, so again, as we know now, it's, again, preliminary, there were two officer cars. The first of the cars that responded knocked on the front door. The officer who's deceased was part of the second two-officer car that responded.
What was the call?
It was a domestic related call where a woman called saying that she was being chased by a man with a gun. And that's what the officers were responding to.
Anything about the sheriff's office?
We'll hold off on that as well.
Jermon, CBS.
Superintendent Brown,
yes.
About the fallen officer being in close range when the shots were fired. Is there anything at this point in your investigation that shows you know that the call was because someone had a gun? Did the officers, the second ones that were in that pursuit, did they see the gun? Were they aware that there was a call for the suspect with a gun? And when they were that close, were their guns drawn at that moment?
So this speaks to the mayor's comments about officers run toward danger to protect all of us. They do it willingly. They're willing to make the ultimate sacrifice. They hope that they never are asked to give their life, but they're willing to do it. So yes, this second car with the officer who responded, who is deceased, they all knew it was an officer with a gun call. and they were there. I'm sorry, an offender with a gun call, and they were there to protect this victim, and they were willing to put their lives on the line to protect this victim. So they're there. They know that this is the offender with the gun, and unfortunately, as they identify him, he turns and immediately, without warning or notice, shoots at the officer, and the officer does return fire, and he does strike the offender. And again, the offender is in critical condition.
WGN, Jen?
We were hearing a female officer was injured.
No, that's inaccurate. Inaccurate. No, inaccurate. Yeah, it's a male officer. The officer is deceased.
Can you talk about misinformation about that and how that impacts?
Yeah, unfortunately, there are many people who want to be first to tell you the news, and likely inaccurately. And unfortunately, without any concern for the families, we had some time to try to identify where the officer's wife was located and get her here and get her notified. And unfortunately, others thought that the family doesn't matter. I want to be first to get it out to the media. We'll let them have to figure out how to live with that. Not having compassion for these families, just so you could be first to tell reporters. It's shameful. It's shameful. It's shameful, and people should never do that.
One last question to the right.
Did any other responding officer use their weapon during the...
No, they did not. It happened so fast that the other officers heard shots, and at that point were trying to get render aid and get help for this officer for a chance to survive.
Do we know if the officer actually radioed for help himself, or was it...
We don't know any of that detail yet. Thank you all so very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you, sir. Thank you, everyone.
Superintendent David Brown from the Chicago Police Department taking several questions from the media about what happened today at 5200, the 5200 block of South Spalding. We now know that a officer who has been on the force for 5 years lost his life today as they responded to a 911 call saying that a man was chasing a woman down the street with a gun, also saying that that person was shot and is in critical condition but survived.
An 18-year-old suspect. And Rob, as we look at the pictures here, we see the ambulance. We know what follows after he has confirmed that an officer has been killed in a line of duty. They are waiting to transport this officer, this public servant, to the medical examiner's office, which is protocol after an officer is shot and killed in the line of duty. The cars are lining up, stretching 2 to 3, 4 blocks outside of Mount Sinai Hospital. Superintendent David Brown said they wanted to get information from the family first before they made any public statements. After that has happened, he said a family of public servants. 5 years on the force. He said he had to make sure he talked to his wife, so we do know that the deceased police officer has a wife and more family members. Let's go live to Liz Nagy, who was right at that news conference we just witnessed. Liz, what can you tell us?
Cheryl, this is the worst news that we feared, that police officers feared in the over the past several hours, that a Chicago police officer has now been shot and killed in the line of duty in that situation in Gage Park this afternoon. The superintendent provided some details on how that happened. He said the officer who was ultimately shot and killed was part of a second pair of officers who was responding to that scene. The initial call, they said, was for a domestic disturbance. There was one pair of officers, he said, that showed up and knocked on the door. There was another car that followed up, and that is the car that was carrying the officer who was ultimately shot and killed. They said the man was running down the street with the gun. The officer who was shot and killed, whose name we still do not know right now, was following close behind, engaged him, and they said that offender fired multiple shots, struck the officer multiple times. The officer was able to discharge his weapon, strike the offender as well. We know right now that offender is also in critical condition. I believe the superintendent said he was shot in the hand. There's not much information they said they have right now on that offender, except that he's an 18-year-old male with a limited criminal history, at least what they've been able to discover so far. But I want to say what struck me listening to the superintendent during that news conference, besides the information, the horrificness of the information that he was conveying was the faces on the officers who were lined up behind him. These are officers who come to work every day, as he said, running toward danger, and you could see the sadness and the grief on their face, the information sinking in as Superintendent David Brown told us that in fact one of their colleagues, one of their young members of the police force, has now passed away after responding to a call here late this afternoon.
Every officer in this police department, and for that matter, every officer in this country, is grieving today. Policing is a big family of people who know at some point they may be asked to make the ultimate sacrifice. But you never wish or hope that it actually happens. And tonight this tragedy did. There are some broken hearts that will take a long time to grieve.
You could hear the heaviness in Superintendent David Brown's voice as he spoke to the public, but also speaking sort of directly there to men and women of the police department, not just the Chicago Police Department, but to police departments here in the Chicago area and across the country. So this is what officers fear and what they know may be a reality when they go to work every single day. Chicago police officers have been here at Mount Sinai Hospital for the past several hours, consoling each other, and now they will have to prepare for a procession to take that officer's body here from the hospital to the medical examiner's office down the street. It's something that they know how to do, but it is something that is a very somber event every single time it happens. Of course, all of us want to know the name of that young male police officer who was shot and killed here this afternoon, but Superintendent David Brown said right now his family is still working to contact family members in other parts of the world. They did say he has family members in Colombia who will want to try and get here to grieve with their family members. They said he has a wife who they were able to contact and rush her here to the hospital. So because that family is now dealing with all of this, they are withholding that officer's name for their privacy, at least right now, and asking everybody to just wrap their arms around this officer's family while they deal with the worst possible situation. Robin, Cheryl.
And Liz, today, very poignant moment tonight because Superintendent David Brown handed in his resignation. And the last statement that he made, it said he had the honor of working here in Chicago, but he also said that he hoped and he prayed every night for the men and women in blue that they return home after their shifts. Tonight, that did not happen for this 5-year veteran because it is the end of watch for him after answering a domestic violence call on the south side of Chicago at 52nd and Spalding. This happened around 4:43 in the afternoon. The report was that there was a male chasing a female with a gun. 2 officers' cars arriving at the scene. There was exchange of gunfire. And Liz, do we know for sure if the officer who was killed was able to shoot at the suspect, or were there other officers involved in the shooting of the 18-year-old suspect now in the hospital in critical condition?
Superintendent David Brown was giving out a lot of information in that news conference, but I believe he did say that the officer who was ultimately shot and killed was able to discharge his weapon. And preliminarily, I believe they don't believe that other officers fired any shots. But of course, that is all very, very preliminary information. There is still an entire team of detectives and investigators at the scene of that shooting at 52nd and Spalding that will now spend hours trying to speak with witnesses, trying to speak with other members of the police department, looking at body-worn camera video that will be very crucial. Also pod camera video, those cameras that are on street lights and street poles to sort of capture the scene. All of that will be very critical in piecing together this situation, the scanner traffic on whether those officers were able to radio for help. But they did say that the officer who was responding to the call was aware that the offender had a gun. They saw him running down the street. So of course this will now also be part of an investigation for the Civilian Office of Police Accountability, as is always the case when a Chicago police officer discharges their firearm. So there will be a lot of technical details that will have to come out of this investigation as that plays out over the next few hours, days, and weeks.
And Liz, we were listening with you. I just want to clarify a few facts because I know you were there trying to gather information as well as trying to find out what's going on around you. The superintendent said this suspect was shot in the head by the officer and is in critical condition. And also that as he ran, so there were two squads that responded. The first one went to the door of the 911 call, and then the second car arrived while this suspect was running away. And Superintendent Brown just said he turned to the officers and immediately opened fire. There was no lag time there between that and then the officer returned fire. And you mentioned some of the scanner traffic that we get, it's encrypted, but we've heard some of the 911 call, some of the dispatch between the officers there at the scene, and it's describing what you said. It was just a frantic effort, a 10-1 to get more officers to arrive there and to try and help that officer who's now lost his life. Are you seeing any movement there? You might be away from the emergency room because we see ambulance 8 that is waiting to take this officer, we presume, to the medical examiner's office. Can you see any movement there?
No, it's possible that with the chopper that you guys have a better view of the situation, or at least a wider view than we do here on the ground. We haven't been able to see any movement. It does look like perhaps some of the cars have cleared out immediately in front of the hospital, but we've not seen any sort of mass accumulation of officers, although we cannot see the front of the emergency room where these things tend to start from where we are standing. So it's possible that you will see that before we do out here on the scene, because again, we are so far removed from the center of this situation.
All right, Liz, thank you for that update. We appreciate your excellent reporting on the scene tonight as we still look as the officers are preparing to salute as part of the procedure after an officer is killed in the line of duty.
We'll keep an eye on this as we see that procession. We want to go back to Kate Kogirin, who's at the scene where this all unfolded. She's been listening with us. You now have the information on what police say transpired there this afternoon. Have you had a chance to talk to any community members and neighbors about what unfolded there?
Well, not yet, Rob and Cheryl. Unfortunately, it is actually kind of calmed down here at the scene. Undoubtedly, I'm sure some of the officers that were responding have now moved over to that hospital, Mount Sinai, where the officer died. I can only imagine a lot of heavy hearts here on the scene as they've been trying to assess this area while knowing that one of their own has now been lost. As to what happened here, as we heard in that news conference, Superintendent David Brown saying this all started with reports of a domestic violence call here on the 5200 block of South Spalding. Brown mentioning that there were reports of a person with a gun, a man chasing a woman in this area with a weapon, and that there were 2 police cars that responded. The first pair of officers knocking on the residence. The second police car with that officer who was shot and killed arrived just as that suspect was running away. Officer Brown mentioning that the officer who was shot and killed again in that second car as the suspect was running away. Brown said that there was a chase with the officer following closely. Then there was an exchange of gunfire, as we mentioned earlier. Sadly, the officer who was killed was shot multiple times. They were able to shoot that offender or suspect, and as we heard from Superintendent David Brown, we now know that that suspect was shot in the head in critical condition. Again, just such heavy news, especially here at the scene where officers rushed here immediately following those reports. There was a heavy police presence first here initially, and now we've learned this news, we've seen that police presence significantly go down. Certainly, I'm sure a lot of the officers who were here on the scene now trying to be with the rest of their team, just knowing that they have lost one of their own. Certainly heavy over at the hospital. I'm sure behind us too, the officers here trying to work that scene while also keeping that in mind. So again, just a somber moment, much more quieter here, understanding exactly what has unfolded. Reporting live here at Gage Park, we'll send it back to you guys in the studio.
Okay, Kate, thank you. That has now become a homicide scene, a crime scene there. So investigators are going to piece together, as Superintendent Brown said, with COPA too, they've got to start to piece together the body cam video and determine exactly what happened.
And speak to the victim who made the original phone call for the 911 distress.
A woman, right.
Absolutely. So let's go live to the newsroom where Ravi Baichwal has been working all night and compiling information about the last time an officer was killed in the line of duty. Ravi.
Yeah, Cheryl and Rob, you all remember that wonderful name, Ella French, yes. that constable, and she is the last Chicago police officer who died in the line of duty. That happening back in August of 2021. It would seem to have been a streak of fatal shootings of Chicago officers, but she was the last one that was shot in the line of duty, and that happened in that summer. And she was shot along with her partner, excuse me, Carlos Yanez Jr. And you'll remember that he miraculously survived that incident. It was a traffic stop. It is a traffic stop that had gone wrong. There was guns involved immediately, and she was just shot. Basically, it sounds in one sense kind of similar to what the Superintendent Brown was saying, that these matters just transpired in such quick succession. In just a few moments, it goes from a situation where you get a call, in this case, in her case, Ella French's case, a traffic stop, to something that is leading to a Chicago police officer being mortally wounded. She was killed back in August 2021, and 2 people have been charged with first-degree murder in her death. Those would be the brothers Eric and Imonte Morgan. They apparently had bought, according to court records, they had bought a 22 caliber Glock semi-automatic pistol from someone else who had made a straw purchase for them. And that person who made that purchase has actually been convicted on that score, and actually is just in February of this year, reported to prison to serve a 2.5-year sentence for purchasing that gun. That person was obviously extremely remorseful about what had happened and not being directly involved in that death, but still, it tells you a little bit something about how guns get out into the community and end up in certain circumstances leading to these kinds of outcomes. But Ella French is fondly remembered by Chicagoans and by her mother, who we often will see at police memorials, and the sadness on her face and the heaviness in her heart is something that just comes right through the camera. We always see it, and she's only the latest in a long line of police families and family members who have had to deal with the kind of angst and questions that are no doubt floating through the minds of those who are in blue and who serve us and protect us and serve and protect tonight. And you saw all those faces of concern, the fraternity, the sorority that is the Chicago Police Department, and indeed police officers and first responders everywhere responding to the emotion that just overtakes all of them when something like this has happened. So yeah, Ella French, August of 2021, and we will still wait to see how justice prevails in that situation. Guys?
Ravi, thank you. We want to go back out live to Mount Sinai Hospital to see what's happening there. Chopper 7 HD has been above the scene for some time here as we await the procession to take the medical exam, to take the officer to the medical examiner.
We remember when Ella French was killed in the line of duty, it was considered to be a routine traffic stop. Her and her partner, Officer Carlos Yanez, were both injured, and Ella French fatally injured. We remember her mother talking about her love for dogs, and we remember the scene that happened just like this when the officer is transported to the medical examiner's office. That's at 2121 West Harrison, so it won't be too far from the hospital, which is located at 1500 South Fairfield. But the poignant part will be when the officers salute one of their own. This is a family. They have lost one of their family members, and Superintendent David Brown talked about the heartbreaking loss and having to call those family members, his wife rushing her to the hospital, and hopefully being able to see her husband before he passed away. He was doing his job, simply doing his job, answering the call, and now this is the end of his watch.
And the mayor talked about that, as did the superintendent, how every day how many thousands of officers run toward danger, and they were responding to the 911 call of a suspect with a gun. These officers knew the call was a suspect with a weapon. That ambulance, Chopper 7 HD, was above the scene this afternoon. It was still daylight, and that was the same ambulance that rushed from that scene to the hospital with this wounded officer who has now died, a 5-year, young, 5 years on the force. Family of public servants, that stuck out to me too, Cheryl, that the superintendent mentioned that. So there are other family members who, whether they're Chicago police officers, Chicago Fire Department, or
they could be military.
Yeah, they're just a family of servants. So this is a family who's dedicated its life to helping others in this community. And now they're dealing with this. Chopper's going to refuel for us tonight as we continue to keep an eye on this and update you on it, on what happened. If you're just joining us, a Chicago police officer lost his life responding to a call today, and that suspect engaged in gunfire with this officer. That suspect shot in the head. This is according to police. In critical condition tonight.
And you know, if you ever call 911 and an officer arrives at the scene, you see the words on the side of the police car: protect and serve. That is what this officer was trying to do when he arrived at that scene, because there was a distress call from a female caller who said she needed help.
Yeah, and it was the first call. Was they went to the door right away and to check on her if she was okay. And then that second car that pulls up, the superintendent said, is the ones who chased this man with a gun.
And life changes in an instant, Rob, because
yeah,
they arrive at the scene just answering the call of duty to help, to protect and serve, and in a matter of minutes, their lives change. Every single officer out there tonight, we have several cars parked outside of our State Street studios on a regular basis. They're outside tonight. They are mourning the loss of a family member. As Superintendent Brown said, this is heartbreaking. Hearts are broken.
Yeah.
And Mayor Lightfoot talking about the dedication, the commitment, the service to protect all of us.
Yeah, we have a crew on the ground, and it goes to what you're saying. You see how many police officers are there, and it's not just Chicago police. We saw a lot of Illinois State troopers arrive there, and when they hear the call, the 10-1, which is an officer needs help or an officer down, it's a mad rush to that scene, and that happened tonight, and they all went there, and now they're all at the hospital as they wait now for one of their own to go to the medical examiner. And the family, as you mentioned, the superintendent said, is there. His wife is there. And there was some misinformation about whether it was a man or a woman who was shot, and it is a male officer who lost his life tonight. And the body camera video they're going to review now, so there will likely be video of how this incident began, how it unfolded, and how it finished. So this is our ground shot now from one of our crews, Liz Nagy, there on the scene as well, as we wait. I think there's no urgency here. They're going to do this when the family has got to be just beside itself inside with loved ones, now knowing the reality of what they have to deal with for the rest of their lives.
Yeah, there is respect, there is protocol, and you can see generations of cops, police officers who have arrived at Mount Sinai Hospital. Superintendent Brown said he had asked the entire city of Chicago tonight and days forward that this city cover this officer's family. And as we know, they will need prayers and support in the coming hours, in the coming days, in the coming weeks, months, and years, because their lives have changed forever. You see sergeants, you see detectives, you see new police officers, rookie officers who recently graduated from police graduation. They have arrived at the scene to pay respects, to hold up the honor of the shield tonight. Very somber scene. As you see the officers hugging one another in disbelief that it has happened to one of their own in the line of duty, on their job, just doing their job. Their families send them away every day, hoping that they return at the end of their shift. But tonight, that is not the case for this officer. It is the end of the watch.
We were cautious tonight, waiting to hear. When we knew the superintendent and the mayor were headed to the hospital, we knew it was grim. Yeah. And we wanted to wait to make sure we got all our facts straight. As we have so many sources, our I-team, our reporters that get information, and we were cautious. We waited to hear from the superintendent on what happened. This suspect, according to the superintendent, 18 years old. One prior violation, he described it as, and 18. This person was, who police say shot and killed this young officer. Just 5 years on the force. The superintendent said a bright future ahead of him. And no doubt many of these officers you're looking at tonight know him well.
It was 4:43 when the call came out, and the days are getting brighter.
It was
and the
still
sun
daylight,
is
yeah.
still light at that time. The sun was out today, so you could see there was a visual on this suspect as he exited the home where the officers arrived to answer the call of a female saying that she was being chased with this male 18-year-old.
Yeah, when he says a door, we're not sure what did she run into a home and close a door, or where was he when these officers arrived? We're not sure yet, but we were told that one squad went to the door where this call, they got an address and they went to the door and knocked on it, and then the second squad car, the officer who was killed was in, started pursuing, they called a foot chase, started pursuing this suspect. And you're right, Cheryl, it was a bright, warm day today, and the chopper was above, our chopper was above the scene relatively quickly as we were watching that feed come in live in the newsroom, and we could see officers running. It looked like it was near a park, and we said this was near a school. But,
Sawyer Elementary
Sawyer
School.
Elementary, but you could see it was near what looked like a slide or a playground where there was someone on the ground handcuffed. We haven't shown that video to our viewers yet because we don't know if that indeed was the suspect, but you could see that it was right there, right off the street in broad daylight where this unfolded, and you could see so many officers running to that scene to try and figure out what happened and try and get some help to their fellow officer who got shot.
And school, of course, ends at 3 o'clock or so the school had been let out for the day. However, it was a beautiful day today, a beautiful winter day. People were at that park at that time of day because the sun hadn't gone down. We were doing the 5 o'clock news today, and we started our newscast off. You continued, you had it in the 4 o'clock about an officer who had been injured and shot. And I know that phones were just going off all over the city because when you hear an officer has been injured or shot in the line of duty, family members are texting to make sure you respond. I'm sending text messages to all my family members who are Chicago police officers.
We all immediately do.
To make sure, are you okay? Can you please return and let me know? And I did get responses back from family members who said they were okay, but not okay.
And it's the first thing everyone does when they hear about this. Who knows? And most of us know, many of us here in this newsroom have friends who are active.
Friends and family.
Yes, who are active law enforcement officers and state police, or Secret Service, or FBI, or Chicago police in particular. And so you're right, we were immediately all reaching out to see if our friends were okay.
Yeah.
But you got to imagine how many people were doing that in the city of Chicago, because it's such a huge force, right? And you start to immediately, you see it on social media, that's where it always starts. And we're cautious as we give you details on the air, but you're immediately wondering, oh my gosh, is it someone we know? And those calls were made, and for a lot of people tonight, it was someone they knew, and now this is what they have to deal with tonight. And it's a horrible thing. It's a horrible reality for a lot of people.
And he said the 8th District, so immediately when you hear about and the location of the shooting, you start to think who is working that shift right now to call and make those phone calls, who's in that area, who would respond to that domestic violence 911 call. And everybody is checking on everybody because this is family, no matter the ages. This is a support system, and that's why you see dozens and dozens of police cars and police officers and detectives and sergeants who are on the scene right now coming to console one another, because that's what you do. You come together to check on each other after one of your own is killed in the line of duty, and all you might need is a hug at this moment being a police officer, even though they know this is part of the job, they protect and serve, but when you lose one of your own in the line of duty, it is different. It feels different. It is different because life changes forever.
And you saw that when it was daylight when this happened, and then as the sun set, we could see dozens and dozens of flashing blue lights for blocks, and that's when we knew this was not good, because they were at the hospital. There you see a hug right there.
They're just hugging,
and you knew that was not good. And a lot of these officers first went to the scene to try and help, initially hearing that call, because they all hear it on their radios, and they all try and get to that scene to help. And then the officer was taken to this hospital, Mount Sinai, is what you're looking at here, where we're told the officer has lost his life. So we will wait now for a procession to the medical examiner's office. And Ravi was talking about this earlier. Last time we saw that was Ella French. It's been
August
a few
of
years.
2021.
Yeah.
I remember it like it was yesterday, and it hasn't been that very long.
No.
We talked about it. We knew she loved dogs. Her mom would talk about it all the time. And those are the things that these officers are talking about tonight. The gentleman, the police officer, the husband, the brother, the son.
And Ella French's family and Mr. Yanez's family, they know tonight this has happened to someone else, and it opens up new wounds for a lot of people. It stings for a lot of people, and I like the superintendent and the mayor too making a point. She didn't talk for long, but she made a point that every single day these officers are running right toward it. That 911 call came in, those officers got that call, and they didn't even hesitate.
No.
They went immediately.
They run to the danger, as she said. And she also talked about the struggle it is for these officers every day when they put the badge on and they leave their homes, they leave their families, and the tough tasks of solving crimes, answering the call of duty here in the city. And she knows for the family, Superintendent Brown talked about family members want to come as far as from Colombia so that they can mourn the passing of a family member. And you think about this, they're thinking about Ella French tonight. They're thinking about Ella French's son, Ella French's family members, Ella French's mom, who was struggling when this happened. And tonight we think about the mother and father of this young police officer who said, you know what, I want to serve this city of Chicago and become a police officer. And this is what happened. So you think about, he is a son, you know, he has friends, he has teachers who taught him to this point, who are thinking about him on this day. And what an honorable, ultimate sacrifice that he made today, not knowing when he left his home, he thought he was coming home to his wife.
They all do. And now we go on to the investigation. The superintendent answered more questions today. This is the day he resigned, by the way. It was an interesting day as that story developed. And then after sharing a statement with the media, had to go do this, talk to people and and described what they think happened. But now COPA steps in, and the superintendent mentioned there's body camera video. There will perhaps be pod camera video. Those are the cameras that they look like little globes that are on some street corners. They'll start to review that. But now that slow, meticulous process will start. What happened in those few seconds, like you said, if that, and the superintendent says this suspect ran, these officers ran after him, and then the suspect, according to Superintendent David Brown, turned and immediately started firing. And then the officer fired back.
And Rob, we have to think about the other officers who were on the scene when they saw their own get shot. The trauma that they will never forget because they saw what happened. And they wanted to make sure, they were trying to save the officer's life as well. So they won't ever forget. Their lives are changed forever.
Well, they see so much. I mean, we have a gun violence plague in the city, and they see that all the time, but they don't expect to see one of their own on the ground fighting for their life. And they saw that tonight. And this suspect, according to David Brown again, 18 years old with one previous violation, he called it. Just not well known to police, because I think they would tell us that, just said his age and that he had one prior violation that they could find was what he said. That was his description. And then mentioned, as you said, this officer who lost his life. They're trying to get family from other parts of the world. Yeah, coming to Chicago now for the worst news they could possibly imagine.
And we don't know the relationship between the woman who called. We don't know the relationship between the woman who called
and the suspect,
who shot this officer.
The call had come in something like that she was being chased
with a man with a gun.
Running down the street or the sidewalk with a gun, and that was the initial call that came in. And so the superintendent described this as a domestic call. Just responding to a domestic call, which happens so much in this city. How many domestic calls do these men and women respond to? And this one ended horribly, but that was the description of why those officers were even at 52nd and Spalding tonight.
The fact that the suspect had a gun. It was a domestic call with a gun involved.
Yeah, running with, right.
This situation to a whole new level, because when a weapon is involved, the officers, they respond to domestic violence calls all the time. But this one involved a gun. So what happened after that was different.
And they knew they were running after a guy with a gun.
Right.
And probably at that time didn't know, was the 911 caller okay? And they're just in reaction mode.
And we don't know what the 911 call said. We don't know what the person on the other end described the situation that she was involved in and how her life could have been threatened at that point, or what she felt her life was perhaps being threatened. And that's why she called 911 for help. And they arrive on the scene to find out what happened. Superintendent Brown said they went to a door and knocked on the door.
Yeah, let's get them up to speed, I think, here.
The officers says that the assailant ran out of the door with the gun. So it's still not clear.
Or said ran. Yeah, he said ran. Yeah, he said ran. So if you're just joining us on our streaming continuous coverage here, it's a good idea, Cheryl, to kind of review what happened tonight. The Chicago Police Superintendent spoke outside Mount Sinai Hospital just a short time ago and said a 5-year veteran of the police force has been shot and killed. And as you mentioned, two squad cars responding to the scene of a call, a domestic call of a man with a gun. The first squad car arrives, knocks on that door, and then the second squad car, where the officer who died tonight was, chases after that suspect.
Let's take a listen in to see how Superintendent Brown describes the situation.
They were there to protect this victim, and they were willing to put their lives on the line to protect this victim. So they're there. They know that this is the offender with the gun. And unfortunately, as they identify him, he turns and immediately, without warning or notice, shoots at the officer. And the officer does return fire, and he does strike the offender.
That offender, 18 years old, according to the superintendent, and that's the early investigation details that we heard from the superintendent. Ravi Baishwal in the newsroom with more for us. Ravi.
Yeah, then in a newsroom, and it's a sad newsroom, as it's a sad city right now, given what has transpired, and you guys are telling the story so ably. And I was just telling our viewers a little bit earlier about Ella French and that situation that happened, and we remember kind of the collective trauma that you go through, not only as a reporter and all the rest of it, but as a citizen of the city and the region, when someone who's dedicated to protecting you and serving you loses their life in doing exactly that. So Ella French was the last person who actually was gunned down in felonious circumstances. And take a look here. So we have some video now showing what had happened back then, the incident, this in August of 2021. And she was someone who we would learn later was drawn directly to the service component of police work and wanted to build a better community. And she was shot during during working through a traffic stop. She and her partner, Carlos Yanez Jr., were shot when they pulled someone over here, and it happened in a flash, literally in a flash. Now, Carlos Yanez suffered grievous injuries. I believe he lost sight to one eye, but Ella French died that night in those circumstances back in the summer of 2021, and we are still awaiting to see how the judicial system deals with the two people who are charged with first-degree murder in that case, Eric Morgan and his brother Amante. Someone else was actually charged and convicted of buying a ghost gun, which was used in the commission of that murder of a police officer. That person, Jamel Dancy, was sentenced in December, just before Christmas, and reported to prison for a 2.5-year sentence in February, so just about three weeks ago or so. And that sentence was actually denounced by members of the Chicago Police Department and people who knew Ella French and others who said, it just wasn't enough. The judge saying, well, this is what was just in that circumstance, but that was for providing the gun. The idea that the person who was providing the gun that was used at that time was not necessarily going to know exactly how it was going to be used. But in looking up some other statistics for you and to put some context around this and the kind of danger that police officers and these first responders are in, I was just looking at some numbers here. The FBI reporting that last year, some 129 police officers actually died in the line of duty, 75% of them in what they consider felonious circumstances. And primarily, as you look through the statistics, what that means is some sort of gunfire being involved, and felonious circumstances obviously in the sense of a crime being committed. So 129 across the country, and just looking at some of the names of the fallen, we remember, Rob and Cheryl, the names of these officers all the time as we go back and think about Ella French and Carlos Yanez. We remember so many others that just happened not too long ago. We remember Eduardo Marmoleo and his partner Conrad Gary. They were struck by a train while they were out moving towards danger, doing their police work, and they were struck by a train back just before Christmas of 2018, December 17th, 2018, and that shocked us all into a new consciousness. And just before that, just a month before that, we also had the loss of police officer Samuel Jimenez, also in a gunfire situation, that happening back in November of 2018. And we all remember pretty much where we were when Commander Paul Bauer died back in February of 2018, chasing down a suspect not too far away from our newsroom, not too far, right in the heart of downtown. As we take a look at some live shots again of all the police officers and the cars that are waiting at the hospital right there. The commander, Paul Bauer, gunned down also by gunfire, chasing a suspect, and if we remember correctly, he was not even sort of on that duty. He was coming from a meeting with some community activists, and I believe at City Hall, and happened to be just traversing near the State of Illinois building, and heard on his police radio someone was running away from the police, and there was a call, and he just responded, just in the kind of instinctive, trained kind of way. And this was a big time commander, and then he lost his life in the line of duty right there. So remembering these names get etched on walls, and we remember them, and the Chicago Police Foundation does such a wonderful job in keeping their memories alive and helping everyone understand that the sacrifice those police officers are making is a sacrifice for the safety really of all of us. And we unfortunately are soon to be able to add another name to that very sad list. Back to you guys.
Robbie, this officer tonight making the ultimate sacrifice at the end of his watch. And a lot of times as we take a live look here at Mount Sinai Hospital outside the emergency room where this officer was rushed after being shot on the city's south side in the Gage Park neighborhood, many times when the officer is transported to the medical examiner's office, they raise flags using fire trucks to honor and salute the passing of this officer who would make the ultimate sacrifice. So perhaps they could be preparing that scene at the medical examiner's office tonight, or perhaps they're waiting for more family members to arrive here, as well as fellow officers who are on the same team, or they're just making sure all the protocol and the respect is taking place. They have lost a family member. For them, they're mourning immediately, and they will mourn for days to come. Ravi talked about officers who passing away and being killed in the line of duty. For these officers who put their lives on the line every single day, the men and women in blue who do this to protect and serve the city of Chicago. The city tonight is mourning, praying, and covering this family at the request of Superintendent David Brown. Covering the family means praying, supporting, asking if you need help, simply smiling, hugging, taking the phone calls, taking food to the home tonight, where his wife and family members will have gathered later on tonight. In the hours and days ahead, they will be stopping by to say thank you. And we should say at this moment, as citizens of this city, we want to extend our gratitude, our thank you for the ultimate sacrifice that this officer has made tonight. 5 years serving the force, made the decision to say, yes, I want to be a Chicago police officer. Answering this call, it will be the last call this officer was to answer.
The superintendent said this is a family of public servants that this officer came from. Superintendent David Brown and Mayor Lightfoot were at Mount Sinai Hospital, spoke to the media it was about 40 minutes ago, 40 minutes ago, giving us the latest information on what they knew. The superintendent taking some questions on the day he also announced his resignation, urging, as you mentioned, Cheryl, the city of Chicago to pray for this family. That officer shot multiple times. We know that was after an exchange of gunfire. This is once again according to the Chicago Police Department, after they pursued a man who had a weapon. He turned, according to the superintendent, and fired multiple shots, striking that officer and eventually killing him. That offender, according to Brown, just 18 years old, also shot in the head and in critical condition in the hospital, alive tonight.
And while we know that these officers wear bulletproof vests, but we also know where they cover. And according to police officers, this officer was shot in the face and in the legs. That is not covered by the bulletproof vests that is so important in the uniform that they put on every single day. And that is what happened tonight. It wasn't a protective vest that was able to save the life of this officer because of the location of the wounds.
Chopper 7 HD was above that scene as all of this was unfolding at 52nd and Spalding, and it was daylight. This happened during the day. Oh, here the chopper's back up. Chopper 7 HD back up. Yeah, look at that, right? That's grown. That has grown. We were discussing this with you earlier, talking about the amount. Liz Nagy's there for us on the ground, and she had mentioned she saw dozens and dozens, if not more, squad cars there, and now you see the blue lights flashing. When we saw this, as we were trying to gather specifics, we knew it was bad. We knew that this was serious. We knew that something terrible had happened, and now you see the men and women in blue from all departments. They'll come from all over now. You know, they'll come from Indiana, Michigan, and unfortunately for a funeral that will occur, they will come from all over. Okay, so Chopper 7 HD giving us another look at the procession that you mentioned, Cheryl, will start on its way to the medical examiner's office. Those officers have been standing there for hours.
Ambulance 8. And Rob, we also need to talk about the driver of that ambulance who picked up that officer at the scene and rushed with urgency and intention to get to the hospital in hopes of saving this officer's life. That driver, of course, first responder, will face trauma.
Those paramedics were there right away, and we saw that police escorted ambulance get to Mount Sinai with this injured officer. And yeah, so many people that saw this or responded to it and now dealing with the trauma of losing one of their own.
Because the paramedics are rushing because they want to save a life. They took an oath of office to protect and serve and save lives, and now they will transport one of their own brethrens to the medical examiner's office for the official cause of death.
Let's tell you a little bit about this officer. We have not learned the name of this young officer, but we do know that he served in the Chicago Police Department for 5 years. Young officer by veteran standards. We know that he has family outside of the United States. The superintendent mentioned Colombia, I believe.
Absolutely.
Yeah, mentioned Colombia. We know he's married, and we know that his wife was notified. And family and friends are likely there now, obviously there now at Mount Sinai. And there is no hurry. You will let them spend whatever time they want grieving in the hospital before this procession begins, and these officers will stand guard and wait.
Yeah, the family rushes there. Police cars get them as soon as they can get them to the hospitals so that they can see their family members who have been shot in the line of duty. And Superintendent Brown said that they were taking the lead from the family. So they were only releasing information that the family wanted the police department to release, to be known. You have to understand, this is a shock, this is trauma, distress. Their hearts are broken, in the words of Superintendent Brown, because when his wife saw him off today to go to work, she had no idea the call. You expect the call could happen when you become an officer. They appear to be gathering very close now to Ambulance 8, which is a very good indicator that there is about to be movement to the medical examiner's office. That's 2100 West Harrison, and right now they're 1500 South Fairfield. It's not far. What will be miles long will be the police cars, the sea of humanity, the sea of blue that are lining up to escort one of their own to the medical examiner's office, where sometimes they have fire trucks awaiting with the American flag that is waving over, so that when they pass under, it is part of the procession, part of the respect, part of the honor, part of the protocol when you say goodbye.
It's always a moving thing to see, and unfortunately we've seen it too many times in the last several years here in the city of Chicago. The investigation now underway into what happened. It looks like they're saluting now, so this is about to happen. The investigation will continue as the police review body camera video. So we are told by investigators body cameras were operating. We don't know if they were operating the entire time, but we do know there's body camera video on what transpired as this young officer arrived to a domestic call of a man with a gun from a woman, and then he pursued that suspect, according to police, on foot. And then that suspect turned without warning and immediately, according to the superintendent, began firing, and that officer returned fire. Suspect, 18 years old, also shot in the head in critical condition. This officer shot multiple times, did not survive.
And Rob, it looks like they are at the point where they are placing the body of the Chicago police officer into Ambulance 8 at the emergency room area at Mount Sinai Hospital in Chicago. This is procedure, this is respect, it is honor to pay tribute to one of their own killed in the line of duty today on the south side of Chicago, answering the call of domestic violence. As the mayor said, these men and women in blue, they run to the danger to serve and protect. And tonight, this is a powerful scene.
That's what they did. That's what these officers did. They responded to the call, doing their job. They knew this suspect had a weapon, and they went after him. They wanted to make sure. Let's just watch this. It looks like we're seeing some.
They just kneeled down.
Yeah, it looks like we're seeing some movement here as now this will be the procession to the medical examiner's office. There will be hundreds of Chicago police officers, Chicago firefighters. We've seen Illinois State troopers also. And what you'll see here as Chopper 7 HD stays with this is you'll see a procession where the streets will be blocked off, and we will go with the ambulance to the medical examiner's office. as you see the officers now who stood there in the emergency room entrance there for hours. They've been there for quite some time, now moving to continue after support to this young officer who we have not learned his identity, but we do know, young officer with 5 years on the force, coming from, according to the superintendent, a family of public servants. So we send our thoughts to them. It's got to be a terrible time for them. Many who are probably at Mount Sinai Hospital with loved ones right now, as the procession now starts to the medical examiner's office. The last time we saw this in the city of Chicago was when Ella French lost her life protecting the city as well.
That was August of 2021. And the procedure that happens is when the body is placed inside the ambulance. This particular case, it's ambulance 8, the same ambulance that took this officer from the scene of the crime to the hospital. They knelt down, they saluted, and it's a way of saying thank you, rest well, friend, family, brother.
So they saluted the ambulance, and now we'll move to the street as this ambulance will take its time. It will not speed, it will not go fast. It will have obviously many police squad cars escorting it. You have to think there are some family members there, whether they will go with to the medical examiner's office. We don't know, but we know that this is a tough time for a lot of people, including Chicagoans, and including the family, including the French family, including the Bauer family. So many who now relive this again. You see some hugs and embraces from a lot of people. The superintendent was there earlier with Mayor Lightfoot. Superintendent answering some questions, giving us the details he could early on in this investigation. Still so many unanswered questions. The weapon recovered. This suspect only described as having one previous violation, and 18 years old, the suspect who allegedly killed this Chicago police officer today. Here's a ground shot, gives you a bigger sense of how many squad cars are there as we wait. And we saw Illinois State Troopers. We've seen a lot of officers from, you can imagine now, from the surrounding suburbs. Officers will come down to pay their respects, and we'll probably see officers from every department in the city and the suburbs at what's now a funeral. There's one flag with a thin blue line, and we'll now see this procession begin. And you said it's not long, it's not far, just a few miles to the medical examiner's office.
Just a few miles, and the procession is actually miles long as well. We saw from Chopper 7 HD how many police cars and that will be following this ambulance all the way to the medical examiner's office at 2121 West Harrison. We know all too well that location because we have seen this scene before. It is a powerful one when they all come together to salute, and they said a prayer. They knelt down, and you could see them in unison kneel down, salute, say a prayer, and say thank you to a person they call a friend, a brother, one of their own. On this night, we will remember this date. It is the first day of March.
At 52nd and Spalding, where this all unfolded, our Kate Kogirin gathering details for us tonight. She'll have a full report on what's happening there. That is now a crime scene. That will be a place where COPA will spend time. That will be a place where homicide detectives will piece together what happened. Not far from Sawyer Elementary, right?
Elementary.
It was not far from a school. It was after kids were out.
Still light outside.
It was
just
before 5. Yeah, it was just before 5. Still daylight on this nice winter day that just turned horribly tragic in the city of Chicago in an instant. And that's what the superintendent said, that these shots happened so quickly, and then the rush to the scene for that 10-1 call, which is an officer needs assistance or an officer down, and then it turned into an officer shot, and then now here we are tonight at just about 9 o'clock.
And when that call comes in that an officer has been injured, an officer has been shot,
multiple
everything
times.
changes.
Yeah, multiple. This was not one round, according to the superintendent. Multiple times this officer was hit. And you mentioned our reporters, Cheryl, were saying in the face or the head and at least one leg. This officer who lost his life was shot. The suspect, an 18-year-old man, shot in the head as well, in critical condition, but still alive tonight. These officers had responded to a 911 call of a woman saying a man was chasing her with a gun. Unconfirmed, we believe.
Block of Spalding.
Yes.
We don't know the relationship between
her and this suspect, and the first two squads on the scene. The first one knocked on the door where that call, police believe, originated. The second one included this officer who died tonight, and they began pursuing this young suspect on foot. They call it a foot chase. That ensued, and then the superintendent said tonight, without warning, the suspect turned and immediately began firing at the young officer, and that's when the gunshots were exchanged.
An exchange of gunfire.
Both hit.
The 18-year-old suspect shot in the head in critical condition tonight in the hospital. We don't know the age of this officer, but we do know he was considered to be young, according to Superintendent Brown.
5 years on the force.
5 years on the force, married.
Just getting started.
Yeah,
I mean, that's.
He could be, you know, he talked about a family of public servants. A lot of times military, they do serve their country and then they become police officers. So it could be a military family as well. But it is a family that serves this country, serves this city, serves this state. And right now, his service is ended for the city of Chicago. He gave his life and made the ultimate sacrifice trying to protect and serve. You see those words written on the side of police cars. I just saw, we had police cars out front here. We have former police officers who work here at ABC 7. They were walking past State Street with their heads down, sorrowful, in despair, because they knew this happened before. They lived this job and they made it out safely. However, tonight, this officer did not make it past 5 years of service. And this officer has a family. This officer has a mother and a father. He is someone's son.
And some of that family coming from as far away as Columbia. The superintendent saying that they were reaching out to family there to try and get them here. Not the news anyone wants to hear, certainly not a family who lives outside the country. You see now that all the officers who were standing there surrounding that ambulance for quite some time have moved positions. The ambulance has turned on its lights.
They're lining up.
Yeah, we think this procession is about to begin here in just a few minutes. You can see some of the other squad cars with their lights on moving into position, and there will be when you see this, there's really no words. You just watch and take it all in, and send your thoughts and prayers to the family and friends, like the superintendent and the mayor said. The mayor did not speak long. Offered her condolences and did mention this, an important thing, that these men and women, they run into harm's way every single day. And it's just, you get a domestic call, you don't know what to expect, but you hear someone with a gun and you go, and they went immediately. And this, unfortunately, was the result tonight. They knew the suspect, at least the call coming in was that this young man had a gun and was threatening a woman who was frightened enough to call police and ask for help. And they arrived, and then this chase ensued, and they both, the suspect and this officer who has died, exchanged gunfire, and that 18-year-old is in critical condition tonight, but alive.
And you have to think about this officer's partner, who was also on the scene, who was trying to help and protect the partner.
And those dispatch calls, and we are not sharing them with you because it's intense. We'll decide what we want to share and what we don't, and with sensitivity to, like you mentioned, the officer, his partner, and the
his
other,
wife.
and the other, right, and the other officers responding to the scene. Here we go. The ambulance now moving. because it was a call for a 10-1, which was officer down or officer needs assistance, and it happened in seconds. It was just remarkably fast how quickly this happened. And then other officers flooded that community. 52nd and Spalding is where this shooting occurred. And then those officers left that scene and have now been here at Mount Sinai. And this shot here, you just see the ambulance with its lights on, and you think, okay, maybe a few squad cars are there. And when you see this, as we watch it with you in real time, it's extraordinary. There's got to be, Cheryl, over 100 squad cars there.
Or even more. And you can see the Superintendent David Brown, their cars will follow immediately.
And those could have family, yeah, and that might have family in it too, right?
Exactly.
The superintendent in there, or those unmarked units will transfer whoever wants to go with.
Or the partners of this officer, or longtime friends on the force will also maybe want to travel. You see the American flag, they're flying in honor to pay tribute to this officer who gave his life, the ultimate sacrifice, not knowing when he left his home today. And you think about the last conversation he had with his wife and his mother and his father. You see the person holding that flag. It's a powerful tribute.
By now, people in Chicago know what's happening. You'll see people will be standing on the side of the road, the street, to offer their condolences, right? You'll see Chicago firefighters likely at the medical examiner's office. Michelle, you mentioned usually they will do a large American flag will be draped over
an arc of flags,
an arc on some fire ladders,
trucks.
on the fire truck ladders. That is the scene at the medical examiner's office. So you'll see that tribute and respect as well. You could see an Illinois State Trooper Squad car there too. We saw a lot. We had video earlier. A lot of troopers responded to that scene and then responded to the hospital as well. When they hear about one of their own injured, everyone who hears that call on their radio dispatch is going to rush to that scene. And then when they heard the news, they rushed to the hospital. There's the ambulance. It's got its lights on, ready for this procession to begin to the medical examiner's office. If you're just joining us as we stream here with you, we've had extended live coverage. We've been on the air since 7, bringing you the latest on a young officer, 5 years on the force, who was shot and killed at 52nd and Spalding tonight. It was actually this afternoon.
Yeah, in the Gage Park neighborhood,
yeah,
and about
still daylight.
7:45, 7:50, which is about 3 hours after the shooting. Superintendent David Brown spoke outside of the emergency room. And Rob, we've been talking about hours before he arrived, you could see a sea of blue and a sea of police cars. You talk about the 10-1 police officer down. We knew that this was something difficult that was happening, and you could see it in his face when he walked to the microphones, and the first words out of his mouth was, "We are heartbroken. One of our own was fatally shot in a domestic-related call."
And all the top brass from the police department was there. Our reporters who have covered too many of these saw the amount of police responding first to the scene where Kay Cogerin spent most of the day. The amount of police who were there responding to that call, you said, was way more than we knew there was something wrong there. And then when we arrived here to Mount Sinai, that the amount of cars that just kept showing up, then we knew that was
and they gathered outside the emergency room. Rob, we've been covering these stories for so long. We know what that looks like when you gather outside the emergency room, no matter what hospital it is, and they're hugging, their heads are down, they are hand-holding, they are distraught because they know one of their own is being worked on inside with intention to save that officer's life, but knowing the outcome could be very different, especially because it's one of their own. They know the inside story. They know where this officer had been shot before we got information. So that's why they rushed to the scene, because officers call each other on the radio.
It's a family, as you know, and we do the same thing, many of us, because we work so much on stories involving the Chicago police. We have sources who are active
Yeah.
officers and friends, and we talked about this a little bit earlier. You immediately reach out to your loved ones who are law enforcement officers to make sure they're okay, and then you start to get the news on what happened.
This ambulance will go very slowly because that is the respect in the procession. Traveling behind, no doubt, is perhaps Superintendent David Brown. 2 more weeks on the job here in Chicago. After being here for 3 years today, he announced his resignation. And part of his statement, he said, it was an honor to serve this city. But he also said he prayed for the men and women who serve this city that they might come home at the end of their shifts. Tonight, that is not the case for this 5-year veteran of the force who joined the police force because he wanted to protect and serve this city, his community, his family, and he wanted to make his family proud.
Young on the force, just 5 years on the force, according to Superintendent David Brown, but comes from a family of public servants, others who likely are civil servants. So this family knows the dangers of what being a police officer is. But as you mentioned, this is the call no one ever wants to get. But all those families also know it's a call you could get. And Chopper 7 HD is going to follow the procession there as it pulls out. All those roads will be blocked off, so there's a clear path to the medical examiner's office. Inside that ambulance, a 5-year veteran of the force who was shot by an 18-year-old suspect, according to police, multiple times. That suspect also struck in the head. Critical condition tonight, but according to police, still alive in the hospital.
And Rob, it's a powerful scene as we watch this procession head to the Cook County Medical Examiner's office at 2121 West Harrison. And you'll notice that there are some cars of just civilian cars, not police cars. And no doubt it is perhaps friends who are off duty today, who rushed to the hospital, who wanted to be a part of this final ride to the medical examiner's office. There is a pride amongst these men and women as you see them turn the corners, and people are saluting them as they head to the medical examiner's office. These could be the citizens that this officer was sworn to protect and serve. They want to say thank you and express their gratitude as we see fire trucks and firefighters.
It's an emotional thing, Cheryl, to see. It really is, to see as you watch it, and we're watching it with you as it unfolds. It's hard not to be gripped by the reality of what it is, because it happens, and it's as Ravi reviewed some of the other officers who've lost their life in this city. One is too many, and Ella French was the last officer who lost her life in the line of duty, and it was a procession like this. And so it's tough to watch because you know how many people are hurting from it. And you feel you can, in some strange way, and maybe it's because we're all Chicagoans, you feel a connection to what you're seeing. And you see that this is just a young man, 5 years on the force, who was doing his job. And
that part.
And this is how it ended tonight for him and his family. And that's the hard part, is these officers, the men and women, they work so hard. And you hear stories of people, people talk, and you hear stories about what our police doing, and should they be here or there. But the reality is, these men and women every day go to work, and they put on the badge and the vest, and they respond to what this was tonight, a domestic violence call.
They put their life on the line. And Rob, we come to our jobs every day, but they go to their jobs every day knowing the possibilities, but still they go to their jobs with honor, intention, and a dedication and a commitment to own up to when they were sworn to become officers of this city and lawyers of the law. That is what they do when they go to work every day, not thinking it's going to happen, but knowing that it is possible, because it comes with the job. And we know when they start the training and they learn what the life of a police officer will be like. They know their lives can change, but they still go in every day with the pride, the dedication and commitment to serving. As we see these line of Chicago firefighters, they are family, saluting one of their own as well, passing through these streets that they patrol every day.
Yeah, I just want to watch this in silence for a few seconds. And you see the salutes, like you mentioned, Cheryl, and there's always unity from other departments. Firefighters and police officers have a lot in common. And when there's a building burning, they go. And when there's a domestic call, they go. And it's a powerful thing to see. And law enforcement from across this great city and suburbs are here. Look at that. Oh my goodness.
I can't help but feel the power in this picture.
That is just
right here.
That is just something. Chopper 7 HD above the procession for a fallen Chicago police officer, a young veteran of the force, just 5 years, married, from a family of public servants, according to the superintendent, has died tonight. And we are watching the procession to the medical examiner's office with you.
That is what you call the end of the watch. Perhaps we will hear the last radio call sometime later on, but what you are witnessing is the ultimate sacrifice of a Chicago police officer who gave his life in the line of duty today. And we know there is a family mourning the loss of a loved one, a son who wanted to be a police officer, and the pride that he took in protecting and serving his community, serving his city, and the honor of serving his family.
Big family of servants, according to the superintendent, as far as Columbia, trying to make their way now to Chicago. Oh, here, this is these are the trucks, and we've got a ground. We've got two cameras here for you as the arrival of this officer at the medical examiner is taking place.
And as you can see, the fire trucks and the ladders with the flags flying over to welcome home one of their own, the United States flag, waving in glory and gratitude.
Yeah, it is tough to see. It is gripping and powerful, and you realize that we are lucky that these great men and women of Chicago sacrifice their lives for us and protect us. And you see the Chicago Fire Department didn't hesitate to arrive with their firefighters to pay tribute to this young officer who lost his life tonight. And they deserve to know what happened. And it's so early in this investigation, but they deserve answers on what happened to this young officer.
There is respect, there is honor, there is procedure, there is pomp and circumstance as they salute one of their own who's going home for a final time.
Chicago Fire Department firefighters there saluting, joining their brothers and sisters from the Chicago Police Department, joining Illinois State Troopers, joining suburban police officers. No doubt federal law enforcement officers are also there, standing at attention and saluting. And they've done this too many times in the last 5 years or so. The last time we had to watch this, Cheryl, was Ella French losing her life. The French family probably watching this and reliving some of that. And this young officer's family now dealing with an unimaginable. I can't even imagine what that must be like.
That was August of 2021. And you think about Ella French's mother. She knows this pain. She knows this suffering. She knows this despair. But she also knows that her daughter wanted to be a police officer like this police officer, not thinking they would get that phone call.
And it's in the back. It's in the back of every officer's families' minds, right? And you know that when they walk out that door to protect and serve, there is a chance they will not come back, but you never believe it's going to happen to you.
You're hopeful.
Yeah. Look at that on the left, the amount of support for this officer, just lined up dozens and dozens of police vehicles and fire department vehicles stretching for blocks. Yeah, it just shows you the appreciation for this Chicago police officer and for each other. Just a glow of blue there that stretched from here all the way to Mount Sinai Hospital. If you're just joining us, we have just watched the procession of a young Chicago police officer who was shot and killed multiple times, according to the police superintendent, responding to a domestic call, exchanged gunfire with a 18-year-old suspect who is in critical condition tonight and alive. And now we know this officer passed away tonight after that shooting unfolded at 52nd and Spalding this afternoon, about 4:45.
In the Gage Park community, and we are taking a live look from Chopper 7 HD as this ambulance will pull inside the Chicago Medical Examiner's office in the 2100 block of West Harrison after there were major salutes along the way from civilians, from off-duty police officers, from off-duty Illinois State troopers, from firefighters, from citizens who wanted to salute as well because they know they wanted to say thank you to this officer, to this officer's family, who now will have one less person at the table when they gather.
And so many unanswered questions for them that deserve answers, including what exactly happened today and why this suspect would open fire on officers who were responding to that domestic call. There was an Illinois State trooper. These are Chicago police squad cars. Now the investigation into what went wrong here and why this suspect did what he allegedly did, running from police and then firing his weapon, according to the superintendent, immediately striking this officer who has now died several times, multiple times was the description the superintendent gave. That suspect also hit in the head, but this officer did not survive. So what's next? Body camera videos being looked at. The superintendent says there were body cameras that were active. We don't know if the responding officers had those, if the officer who was killed had his work, but we do know there are body camera videos. Pod cam videos, they're going to review. Those are the cameras that are at street corners that often are recording if they're operational all the time. We need to start to ask what happened, and we need to start to find out the details that led to this fatal shooting.
And Superintendent Brown said that information will be released based on what the family wants, because this is their loved one and they want to be in control of what information goes out, because for them, this is their son. This is their loved one, and they want to honor, pay respects,
right, and do
the
it
way
the way
they
want
need to. This is very emotional for the city of Chicago. If you are a city employee, no matter what department you work on, what floor, what building, this is family for them. And they are thinking about a great loss today.
Yeah, we watched as those officers stood at attention at Mount Sinai Hospital as family and friends were inside, because you're right, we need to show great respect to the family, and the superintendent mentioned that, and we need to let them grieve, and we need to allow them to process. I mean, it's hard for us to process watching from here.
Yeah.
You know, here we are in studio watching from our chopper and watching on the ground. You just can't imagine what the people who witnessed this and the people who are directly involved are going through. And every officer from every agency in this area, really in the country, as this is kind of spread nationally, can relate. Yeah. You know, it is the worst nightmare for anybody. You just don't, you hope it never happens to you or your loved one, for these people who simply protect and serve.
This is an extraordinary moment in Chicago history today. And we will remember March 1st, just like we remember August of 2021 when Ella French was killed in the line of duty. So we will remember today.
Yeah, unfortunately, the first day of March, right? The day after the election. Let's recap for you briefly, and then we're going to step away as we start to prepare for our 10 p.m. newscast. We've just watched the procession to the medical examiner's office for a fallen Chicago police officer. Superintendent says the young officer, 5 years on the force, comes from a family of public servants, was shot multiple times responding to a domestic call to a person with a gun in the 5200 block of South Spalding. That happened late this afternoon, but before dusk. And then we learned a short time ago that officer lost his life, and we just watched the procession from Mount Sinai to what you're looking at here, which is the Cook County Medical Examiner's office.
The ultimate sacrifice is what Superintendent David Brown called what happened here as we see this extraordinary scene. The fire trucks with the ladders up, waving the American flag to pay tribute to honor this fallen officer at the end of his watch. He is a son, 5 years service to the city. Superintendent asked that this city that he served cover this family, because these days and hours ahead and months will be difficult days for this family and for the city and for the colleagues and for the brothers and sisters in blue. We are going to take a short break. We will join you back at 10 o'clock over on ABC 7 with a full report after a Chicago police officer shot and killed in the line of duty today, March 1st.